Welcome in, whiskey freaks, to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your number one attitudinal bourbon destination. I'm John Stark. I'll be bringing you candid and sometimes irreverent whiskey news, opinions, and reviews. I'm going to talk about the industry and the products they've been bringing us for hundreds of years. First, a quick shout out to everybody liking, sharing, and especially following and subscribing to the podcast. I want to keep bringing you unique perspectives on the world of whiskey. That kind of thing really motivates me to do better for all of you whiskey freaks. As usual, everything here is free of charge. It's still Cocktober, kids, and that means we're reviewing all things cock, chicken, rooster. You get the shtick? Pretty great, right? Well, today we review Chicken Cock Double Oak. It's a premium offering from our good friends at Grain & Barrel Spirits, based out of Charleston. Don't panic, though. The whiskey is actually produced, barreled, and aged in Bardstown. So we're off to a good start, right? And by premium, I mean relatively expensive. This stuff cost me $100 at my favorite liquor store, and I hope I didn't screw up by buying this one. So in addition to this being cock-related, since it is Cocktober, it's double oak, and the category is huge nowadays. In fact, the growth of the double oak whiskey market, it's been huge in recent years. The trend really began with small craft distilleries, and it gained momentum when Woodford launched their double oak back in, I think it was 2012. And since then, the big distillers like Michter's and Jim Beam and many, many others, they've created their own double oaked expressions. Now, the process of double oaking usually involves aging whiskey in a second oak barrel after the initial aging is done. Now we've got distilleries doing double oaked or double barrel releases too. So this oaked category is huge now, especially in premium whiskey lines. This particular double oak creation from Chicken Cock comes with a cool story, and I'm going to share that story with you. It's different. Maybe cool is an overstatement. You be the judge. It's cool to me. So according to the good folks at Grain & Barrel, now, keep in mind, this is produced by Bardstown Bourbon Company, but it's for the good folks at Grain & Barrel. They ran into an issue several years ago when they decided to create this double oak delight. It seems that back in 2014, there was a barrel shortage due to bad weather. It impacted the logging industry, and for that reason, it reduced the number of white oak trees that were harvested that year. So that knocked the number of barrels that could be made down dramatically. So at Grain & Barrel, they had to come up with a creative solution for aging the whiskey. Their solution was they decided to first age it in used barrels. Then after 7 years, they'd age it again in a new white oak barrel, giving time for the industry to have plenty of white oak for the barrels. Kind of smart. So it is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey because of the final aging in the new barrels. Now, they also say the last part of the aging took place on the top floor of the rickhouse at Bardstown Bourbon Company for 18 months. So we got ourselves an 8.5-year-old straight bourbon whiskey here. It's interesting at the very least. And normally, well, I've seen others age in new and then old, but I've never seen old then new. Anyway, it's a cool story, at least to me. So I mentioned this in my last review, but if you've not listened to it, and you should, where in the heck did the name Chicken Cock come from? Well, chicken cock was a common name for a rooster in the southern United States. The word rooster hadn't come around yet, so cock it was. And chicken cock stood for defiance and bravery. The story goes that during the War of 1812, when British ships were attacking American ships on Lake Champlain, now according to the legend, a cannonball hit a chicken coop on the USS Saratoga. A rooster flew out of the coop, landed on the ship's railing. The bird started crowing loudly, and this supposedly inspired the American sailors to keep fighting boldly. Okay, so on to the review now. Today, as I've already mentioned, I'm cracking open a bottle of Chicken Cock Double Oak. The company is Grain & Barrel. The distillery, like I mentioned already, is Bardstown Bourbon Company. It's a collaboration with the distillery. I believe it was under the direction of master distillers Greg Snyder of Grain & Barrel and Steve Nally. Everybody knows that name at BBC. So a couple of big names there. They should know what they're doing. We're going to find out here in a minute. Comes in at 92 proof. And as I mentioned before, it's aged, when you add it all up, 8.5 years. They say 8, but I think they're not allowed to say 8.5. I can say 8.5. The bottle. Now, I always mention the bottle shape and style. As in my other chicken cock review, this is one cool bottle. It takes you back to that Prohibition days with the design. In fact, it's bottled in a replica of their Prohibition era chicken cock bottle. And you can see it on my socials. I can't even begin to do it justice here. You got to see it for yourselves. Okay, so the price. So this one cost me $100. I've seen it as high as $200 though. So if you see it, be careful not to get screwed over. You really honestly shouldn't, in my opinion, you shouldn't pay more than $100. The mash bill is 80 corn, 11.5 rye, 8.5 malted barley. And that's interesting to note that this mash bill is a lot different than the regular chicken cock, which is a high rye bourbon. This one is corn heavy. Now the color, I say it's like reddish brown. If you go by my standard, it really has promise, if you know how I feel about how whiskey looks in the glass. Now I'm tasting today with a basic Glencairn. Not getting fancy today. And I'm going to go ahead and crack it open. This is really interesting. The bottle, it's kind of unusual. It has a metal screw-off cap that then reveals a really nice cork topper. It's very different. I've never seen a bottle open this way before. It adds a level of uniqueness to it. I'm going to go and pour a little bit in my glass. I'm going to nose it a little bit. My goodness, I'm loving this already. I love dark chocolate with my whiskey. Like I'll eat it at the same time that I taste sometimes, depending on what I'm sipping on. And the beautiful thing about this whiskey is it smells like dark chocolate. I'm getting lots of oak. That's clearly not a surprise here, considering it's double oak. A lot of sweet caramel too. And leather. There's really a lot of good things going on here. Let me swirl it around just a little bit. I'm getting a little dark fruit here as well. Let me take a sip. Wow. Getting vanilla. And it kind of tastes a lot like a baked goods, like if you were eating a breakfast waffle, that type of flavor. That fruit I was smelling kind of makes me think of blackberries. And the leather's hitting pretty strong here. It's pretty strong along with that oak. Let me take another sip. Okay. For me, the oak and the leather on the finish, it's bordering on too much. But the vanilla and the fruit, it softens it out just enough. It just makes it fantastic. What it reminds me of, if you've ever had it before, is Noble Oak. They're double oak. Now, that's as far as the chocolate goes. I was getting chocolate, if I remember correctly, I was getting some really terrific chocolate notes on that Noble Oak. It's sherry finished, okay? This is not sherry finished, but in many ways, and mind you, I love that Noble Oak, double oak when I had it, but that was a couple years ago. I know the differences here. I just wanted to make mention. It's a 90 proofer. This is a 92 proofer, so I think it's a reasonable comparison, at least in that way. So what's the verdict? I'll have the answer right after the money spot. Are you looking to update your bar or man cave with some great photographs or wall art? Head over to Etsy at famousdocs.etsy.com and pick up some fantastic Prohibition, bourbon whiskey, and gangster-related photographs and art. And if you purchase 4 or more items, you'll get 20% off your entire order for a limited time. That's famousdocs.etsy.com. famousdocs.etsy.com. And you can find that in the show notes as well. So as you know, on Blind Tasting Podcast, we have 3 verdict options. Are we going to keep it? Are we going to collect it? Or are we going to cull it? Now, to keep it means to proudly display it in your liquor cabinet or bar. This stuff is good for a pour anytime, but there's no need to stock up on it since it's always available. Collect it. Grab another bottle or 2 or 3 or 4 since you find it so darn delicious, or it just may not be easy to obtain. Lastly, cull it. Use it to loosen rusty bolts or sanitize a dirty toilet. In the case of Chicken Cock Double Oak, I say, keep it. This is a dessert whiskey, kids. It's got decadent chocolate, it's fruit forward, it's got caramel, it's got leather. It just makes a superb sip. Remember, Bardstown Bourbon Company put this together, so it's quality stuff. Now, is it worth $100 or even $200 like I've seen it in a few places? Well, I'm not disappointed at $100. In fact, I love it, but I'd never pay $200 for it. I highly recommend it, and I'm telling you, you're going to want to get your hands on this and share it with somebody. Chicken Cock Double Oak, it's a winner in my book. Last but not least, I got to give a shout out to the farmers, distillery production guys and gals, warehouse workers, bottlers, and truck drivers. They make it happen. So cheers to all of them. Well, thanks for listening, Whiskey Freaks. And don't forget to tune in to the next Blind Tasting Podcast episode as we continue to celebrate Cocktober.